So let me translate that just a little bit. What he means is I always get in trouble. I generally get fired. Then I get rehired to punish me for the things I did. And there's really not much smart there. It's about listening to others and channeling the brilliance that exists in our communities of interest, the communities of practice, and the community of airmen across the globe. And so the topic of this is, how do you teach people to be innovative? And I'd like to unpack that just a little bit with you, because it's a fascinating journey, but it is essential to the survival of our nation. And not just in the Air Force, across the entire society. And it's the same habit that business uses to stay in business. And so I'd like to start this by saying that you teach people how to be innovative by teaching them to observe human nature and understand what motivates people. So we'll start there. And so this won't get too weird, okay? But, understanding people. Because everything that prevents us from being creative, everything that prevents us from being innovative as groups is rooted in human nature. So I like to say, bureaucracy. People will throw that word out, bureaucracy, and they'll say that's the reason we don't innovate, because the bureaucracy or the frozen middle or however they want to describe it. And that's just not true. Bureaucracy is an extension of the human condition and human nature. Where two or more people are gathered, there's bureaucracy. And the more people, the more bureaucracy. The bigger the organization, the bigger the bureaucracy. And it's a very visceral survival mechanism that perpetuates what works, so that we are actually doing things that kept us alive in the past to keep us alive in the future. But it also gets you killed. Because if the bureaucracy perpetuates the past consistently and never really adapts or changes, then other smart competition in life will eventually overtake you. Because the human condition is also filled with people that will steal anything you make, break anything you build, and take away anything that's good that you've created. I wish it wasn't that way. But history has not yet shown any example where altruism and just being kind to another person is a long-term strategy for survival. So in the face of this human nature, the importance of being able to adapt by being innovative and teaching people how to think innovatively and how to be innovators is really key. And so we'll start at the basics. When a human being comes into the Air Force, we start by making sure they have certain qualities of character that are essential in this business. One is humility. You have to be humble in order to be able to reject something that is no longer working and try something new. You have to be courageous, where you are willing to take the risk of saying, okay, this comfort blanket I've had for a long time is no longer keeping me warm, and I've got to go out and find something else. Change is scary. Change is hard. Change is not a natural thing for human beings. Now, there are parts of all of us that understand you need to change to survive, but it's generally the desire to survive that makes you drive to the change, not the fact that you're uncomfortable. You have to get uncomfortable enough. And so this is why, this is rooted in the rise and fall of civilizations. There is a reason why no civilization has lasted forever. And it's because the rise and fall of that civilization is rooted in the inhibitors to innovation. So one question really before us is this: can our Constitution, which is uniquely different in the human condition, these principles of respecting every other human being and manifesting that respect in the fact that you give them authority and power in who they put in charge over them, can this constitutional structure allow America to be perpetually innovative? And the answer is, I don't know. But if we get after teaching our people how to be innovators, we have a fighting chance at least exploring whether America could be perpetually innovative, and we do not sit at the trash heap of history like every other great civilization since the beginning of recorded history. And there's 22 of them if you want to count them, at least that we know of. So when we talk about the basics of teaching people to be innovative, it starts with this family business of every single unit, every single organization, monitoring behavior in the culture that makes sure that, one, we are humble enough to talk about the elephant in the room all the time. Two, we're collaborative enough and respectful enough of every other human being where we will listen to people telling us things that we are doing wrong. And it's hard, telling me of my biases, telling me of my blind spots, telling me about my prejudices. That's hard to hear because we all like to feel good about ourselves, and that doesn't make us feel good about ourselves, but we have to do it. So when we start this journey of how do you teach innovators, you start by developing a culture or a command climate, or however you want to describe it, where everybody in that command climate, they're trying to do the best they can. They're trying to be excellent at their job, but they are humble about the way they approach it, and they are collaborative in the way they seek out different viewpoints that talk about problems. The third element is always, always, always thinking about this one question. And if there's one question you ought to leave here remembering, it's this question. And the question is, whatever job I'm trying to do, whatever thing I have been told is my responsibility, my thing to do in life, I always think to myself, how can I do this better? So some people will use a little humor and say, I'm innovative because I'm lazy, and I want to find a way of not taking those 3 steps, or I want to take a way of doing that job faster, or getting a computer to do it for me so I don't have to do it. But in reality, it is this key question that has to be in the psyche of your workforce, in your culture, in your command climate, that has humble people that are collaborative and listen to every voice they can reach out and grab. And they reach out and they grab it from far and wide, way outside their discipline, way outside of their comfort zone. And they are always, always asking the question, like General Spencer did, how can we do this better? How can I do my job better? Because life also is a competition. It always has been. And if you are not competitive in the way you think about how you make it better before your adversary gets to a point where they can steal it away, if you do not do that ahead of time, you will be too late to need. And this is what kills civilizations. They will sit on their laurels because they're the most powerful nation in the history of mankind. And they will sit there, and they will see the signs of tearing away at the edges of their dominance. And they'll just continue to do the same thing, hoping for the same outcome. And they define what Einstein said as the definition of insanity, doing the same thing, hoping for a different outcome. And so, as we take a look at these elements of innovation, it starts with a culture. It starts with a culture. And if you don't have the culture, none of the other things I'm going to talk about will really work if you don't start with the culture. And the beauty of culture is that the lever of culture is education. So I feel so blessed to be in a job where I can help build an Air Force where we teach innovation at every level. And we start with the cultural piece. We start with the environment. We start with the aptitudes, attitudes, and personal characteristics of the human being in a group as a foundation for a culture that will be perpetually innovative their whole life. And those 3 basic elements: humility, collaboration, and then this dogged pursuit to find a better way of doing the job, whatever that job is. So now we get to the other piece of the human part, and that is the natural tendency for a bureaucracy to repeat the past. And so it's important to define innovation because there are multiple types of innovation. One type of innovation that can happen when you have that kind of culture you heard me say it on the stage if you heard the last one, and that is it's adaptive innovation, or it's innovation that sustains whatever it is you're doing. And that's the kind of thing where if I just make the widget a little faster, a little better, then I'll have a competitive advantage. And businesses do this all the time. A business will be born and say, here's my purpose in life, and here is the thing that I sell that makes me relevant for the niche market that I'm dominating, and they just try to keep making that better and better and better. That type of innovation happens in that cultural paradigm I talked about, and it works pretty good. And bureaucracies are not bad at doing that. They can do that. Even though it's hard, it can still be done. But history has never, ever shown a good example of an organization or a group of people or a bureaucracy that can do the second type of innovation that is essential in this journey, and what ends up causing a civilization to crash or a business to fail. And that is the innovation that changes the game, that jumps you to a different economic curve, that actually questions your very purpose in life, and that you have to change your purpose in order to survive and still get the job done. So in our business of national security, where our job is to fly, fight, and win, our job is to be prepared for the unexpected, our job is to win no matter what, we better be masters at this game of innovation. And we better be world class at developing the culture of innovation, and then the two forms of innovation that keep you perpetually relevant. Innovation that sustains what you're doing today and is working, and then innovation that changes you into something that can do the same thing in a different game, a different world, a different economic curve. So let me describe that and talk about that. And this starts getting up to the more PhD level, because when we say to our force, be innovative, the code there is it's more tactical and operational, where we're asking the force to be innovative with the tools we've given them and to create new tools, but really in the same theory, the same mechanism that we have today. The only way to get an organization to be good at both has played out over time, and there are some companies that have had a good run of it. There are companies you can point to that for 30 years they were perpetually innovative and maintained market dominance. But it's really hard to find examples that did that beyond 30 years. Even something like the Roman Empire that was around for quite a while. The only reason they lasted that long is because they had so much money, and they were so cruel, and they were so barbaric that it took a while for the rest of humanity to kind of tear them apart and eventually break it into, two empires, and then eventually it went off the face of the earth. So let me talk a little bit about this second form of innovation. I think everybody understands the first form of innovation, this thing that sustains what we do. But here is where human nature comes in. So your bureaucracy is designed to protect what it has and what it has worked in the past. And you innovate internally on that to make it better and better, the object more shiny. The problem with innovation that is transformational is that generally it will be a threat to the bureaucracy that they're a part of. So the human being in an organization that is adapting innovatively and making things better and better in the current theology will be killed or fired if they bring something in that threatens everything that the group is doing. Because it will threaten more than just the thing that's getting the job done. It threatens the values. It threatens the heritage. It threatens the hero system. It threatens the honor and the dignity of everybody who is sacrificing and working hard to get the job done in the current group. So we shouldn't be surprised that, we talk about Billy Mitchell's, for example. Or, we can take the example of the cavalry. An organization like the cavalry in 1935 is an interesting example where you had a bureaucracy that used the horse to do the job. And that was their heritage. That was their value. That was their honor. That was their dignity. And every officer had to take equestrian lessons every single day. I mean, that was just part of getting up every day and working with the horse. When General Marshall went to the cavalry in 1935 and asked them, what are you going to do about Blitzkrieg that we see coming? They researched that for years. And General Herr at the time, when General Marshall came back in 1939 and said, okay, what's your answer? General Herr's answer was, we've been giving this a lot of thought. And they had all kinds of analysis. In fact, one of the reports even says that if you take the horse off the battlefield, the IQ of the soldier will go down by 10 points. I mean, this is how blind we can be to facts and to figures and to analysis if we are too wed to our current values and theology with regard to our bureaucracy. And so the answer to General Marshall's question was, the way we are going to beat the Blitzkrieg is we are going to put the horses in trailers, we're going to carry them to the front line, and because they are fresh, they will overwhelm the tank. And we will be victorious, as we have been for the last 1,000 years with the horse on the battlefield. And that's when Marshall canceled the cavalry. But it took Congress 10 more years before they stopped funding the cavalry. Again, bureaucracy and the way things have always been and how hard it is to change in a government that has a balance of power and where we really have none. So how do you do it? How do you take an organization that is brilliant? They are world class. They are the best whatever in the history of mankind. And they start seeing the signs that they need to do something different. How do you turn that trick? And the answer, when you study every organization and grouping that has been successful at doing this, is you do not ask the bureaucracy to reinvent itself. You do not ask them, you don't make the pig slaughter itself. What you do is you find the people that have a natural propensity to be good at innovating. They have these habits of mind. They have this hunger to do things better. And they have this humility where they can actually not be wed to what they did in the past and think differently about a future that somebody else might envision. You pull them out of the organization. And you don't need a lot of them. You just need the right ones. If you have more than 12, you've probably got too many. Now, I can grow to more than that when it gets going. You bring them together, and you pull them out of the bureaucracy altogether. You hide them from the bureaucracy. And you give them money, you give them freedom, and you give them authorities to tinker and to explore and to try. And you do that you plant many seeds. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Have multiple of these as an institution where you have this engine of innovation that sits outside of the bureaucracy that has to be protected by the top. Because if it's not protected by the top, eventually somebody in that bureaucracy will see that and they will kill it. And if you can do this, if you can protect these small groups that are engines of innovation, 9 out of 10 will fail. And you have to just live with that. But maybe even 99 out of 100 will fail. But the one that brings you the idea that's transformational, that is a game changer, that changes the game, that's the one that will pay for all the other failures. Because those failures basically just were discovery. It told you what doesn't work. And the one will pay for the others. This is what venture capitalists do, even though we aren't a venture capitalist. They play on this part of human nature that buys down on innovative ideas in a free market of collaboration, humility, and money to actually do something real. Because we know an idea without money is just a fantasy. So here's what happens, though. Sometimes that great idea will be shown to the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy will kill it because it threatens its values. So the trick to perpetual innovation and to teach people these is that the strategy is different for both. As the leader of an organization, as you've brought these children up with these habits of mind that make them innovative and understand the dynamics of innovation and the magic sauce of innovation that is very elusive, It's like that floaty in your eye. The moment you look at it, it's gone. The moment the bureaucracy sees innovation, it'll kill it. The trick here is to have a strategy for sustaining innovation that is traditional, that we all do, ends, ways, and means. But the strategy for a transformational innovation has to be fluid. It cannot be locked down because it will grow and migrate and move in different places as you explore and try to bring it online. And the predicate is that you design something that uplifts the current investment to the maximum degree possible so that it will be accepted eventually as the strategy evolves. But right now, we do not teach anywhere in our Air Force. We do not teach these different ways of thinking about strategy. We do not teach our leaders to have two methods of strategy in their organizations. One for innovation that makes us better in the current theory, and one to nurture innovation that transforms us before the crisis comes. So the default generally is we trundle along as an Air Force, we call ourselves innovative, and we are on some levels, but we continue marching along thinking everything's okay until there's a crisis, and then it's almost too late to innovate. There's no time because the threat is upon us. So whether you talk about Admiral Rickover or General Schriever or any other group that was able to do something unique that changed the game, changed the character of war, they followed these same patterns of behavior because they understood humanity, they understood the human condition, and they understood the magic principles of innovation that make you successful. So this is how you teach a force to be innovative. You start with a culture. You let them practice these habits of mind and let them innovate and cut their teeth on the tactical, sustaining innovations. And then you start teaching them how to innovate transformationally without alienating themselves from the tribe, the team, the bureaucracy that they're a part of. And the fact that we are getting back to these basics is also part of the human condition because these are not new rules. These principles have been there since the beginning of human beings. And civilizations and people have capitalized on these principles over time. We're just rediscovering them. One of our problems is that we have been so unilaterally dominant economically for so many years since World War II, where some of this work went on, that we have almost stopped practicing this muscle of innovation that is so important in staying one step ahead of the enemy.